and I mean, I'm sure you'll both stay online, you and Monica, to be able to sing the song. I see we have Mr. Bolton here, who's also training his daughters to sing, but I think they're more into heavy rock. Paul, am I correct? So maybe a rap song won't be as good.
No, I don't think I can rap now.
Okay, great. So I tried to give you some background in terms of this data stewardship topic training. So what's happened to us is, of course, we do training on the CDMP certification or the DMBOK, and we go and train several companies. We've trained many companies, and we have quite a lot of fallout's probably not the right word, but a situation where some of the data stewards almost can't hold on to the content that we're providing. I'm sure those of you that have attended the course, it's quite intense. And Drew knows about that, especially when you have to give the course for 4 days. And we find that it's not easy to keep ingesting all of this information or knowledge that you're getting. And of course, because the DMBOK focuses on the why and the what and not the how, it's also very hard to make it a practical course. Okay, so and one of the customers that Veronica and I were training, after the first iteration, and we then said, okay, now we're going to the next iteration. They basically said it's not working for us. This data management CDMP is not working for us, and we were very fortunate that they could give us some feedback. And they basically said, for the business data stewards, it was too technical. Basically, when they saw something like data modeling, it scared the hell out of them. When they saw data architects, it's like, oh, why would I ever want to do that? And we had several challenges with this. Now, interestingly enough, when I went to EDW, I was very privileged to speak to quite a few companies. And the one company that really struck me and their comments, which was a massive oil and gas, one of the top 4 countries in the world. And they basically said, we are really battling with our data stewardship program. We can't get it going. We can't get it up and running. So that's the background. Veronica, I don't know if you've got something to share, and maybe Paul. I think we've all experienced it, and maybe Drew. What's your view on? There's this big gap between we're into data governance and all the 11 areas of the DMBOK, and the data stewards have to provide so much information and input, and we're trying to get them involved, but they just can't hang on to the content. Veronica, anything from your side?
Yes, I have found that with training, when there's a person who's a business data steward, even if they're really, really enthusiastic and they try their hardest, there's a gap where they don't have, I call them hooks. They don't have hooks to hang the information on. So if we're talking about data modeling or something like that, or any, like with acid and base and things like that, that's foreign to them. And they do need to have the data management training. They do need to have the foundations, but they need foundations that are relevant to them.
Right.
And that's where this course came in.
Right. And what made me scared about this course was, especially in reading Bob Siner's book, he actually basically said there shouldn't be an international certification for data stewardship. There is something called the DSBOK, which was developed by e-learning and things like that. But he was quite scathing about it to say he doesn't believe it's appropriate. And basically, his comment was they need to be trained on their data, not generic data, not all sorts of abstract data. So it's that thing again of how do we relate to them and how do they understand what they're doing? Veronica, that's okay. Fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. This that customer that they were lost. They
Yeah.
were so lost, and they also wanted. I wasn't even giving them examples from their industry, so they needed something that they could really relate to understand data management.
Right, right. And interestingly enough, what we find is you probably need quite a bit of practical experience before you can train and present one of these courses. So it's not a read the book and understand. It's actually takes some time. Paul or Drew, is there any comments from your side? Anything you'd like to share in this regard? What's your experience been with customers in terms of this?
Yeah, Howard, I think just actually really just seconding Veronica, a course that I was on presenting previously in Dubai, and it was great to see because he actually just sent me his certificate. He got his associate pass on the CDMP side, but he's an accountant by
Right.
trade, and yes, he's migrating, and he was encouraged to do the course, but just that gap between physically managing and working with the data to a data management perspective was massive for him, a massive jump. And
Right.
although he enjoyed it and he found it interesting and he was quite surprised at how much goes into it and all that, it was just the gap though was a big
Yeah.
it was a
Right.
big chunk for him to get over. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Well, Drew, anything from your side?
Yeah, I think we tend, and we as what I would call the senior leadership of DAMA, tend to forget how much practical experience we've gleaned over
Right.
many years.
Mm.
And as the different disciplines have got formalized and we've been able to adapt to them, we take it for granted.
Yeah.
But you're quite right. You know, somebody in a company suddenly, okay, you're going to be a data steward. It's like, yeah, it is such a massive change. Maybe we're going around it about it too quickly or coming
Right.
at it from the wrong angle.
Yeah.
You know, when
It's a
if
good,
you sit with a whiteboard and a pen and say, right, let's draw a conceptual model, it people catch it instantly. If you say, let's think about the data quality that's going to stop you doing your job, they get it. But when you start talking about formalizing things, and
normalization.
I think it's a bridge too far.
Yeah.
I honestly do, and I have found that in working with prospective data stewards and in some of the courses, you can actually see the lights go out.
Right. I think that's probably the most depressing thing for us as trainers is when you see the lights going off and you've just lost them. And it's hard online and when you're face to face, it's even harder because they actually walk out the door. I had on my first day, they walked out the door and they said, Howard, I don't know what you're talking about and I can't hold on to this. And now I always remember my very first week of training in Saudi, and we were given lawyers. The lawyers came to do the course, the legal people. Now, that legal side is very much based on the Quran, so it was an interesting engagement. And within 2 hours, one of the legal data stewards put their hand up and said, "Howard, you have to help me because I'm feeling so depressed at this point in time. I've already lost you, and we're 2 hours into the discussion, and basically I got an email here saying that I have to go back and teach the other people." And they said, I don't know what to do. I'm battling here now. It was quite amazing because he never stopped, and we constantly joked about it. So and I tried to make sure that I could giving practical examples of where this was important. And right at the end, he said, we had such an amazing revelation about how important it was for legal people to understand data and where it was going and things like that. So it was a lovely experience, and I'm glad he held on to it. But I've seen many more walk out the door, and I don't see them again. So a big challenge. Yes, William.
So one of the things that I do whenever I do my training stuff is I send out stuff up front to get a really good gauge on who knows what.
Yeah.
What their background is. I do research on LinkedIn. I have a look at and try and find triggers.
Yeah.
Because unless you can make it exactly what you guys are saying, unless you can make it real to that individual, you're going to lose them.
Yeah.
Then when they come into the classroom, I have a look at how they sit. And you'll normally find that your power people are sitting at the back and you need to engage them.
Yeah.
These are all these kind of training tricks, etc. And
Sure.
then what I do is I take them and I ask them to basically create a story. And in them creating their story, I then say, now, with your story in mind, we're going to now cover this. And they will then have their stories, and then they build their story, and it makes sense to them.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to make it work any other way.
Great. And I think the other challenge we are under is, and we do say that is this course is about preparing you to write the CDMP exam, and we try to warn them, and we do a pre-assessment and a bit of a discussion as to where you are, and when people are in what we call the danger zone, then we try to encourage them a little bit more. So in terms of moving on, I'm actually very interested in trying to get your feedback, and we'll constantly be doing this in terms of what's going on in your programs. I'd love to, anybody out there that has a really successful program of data stewards, where the data stewards are large and in charge. Anybody can share a great testimony of how their data stewards, how they've enabled their data stewards, how their data stewards are running with it. And just to share with Drew's point in terms of the DAMA board, if we look at the DMBOK, it talks about data stewards all over the place, but nowhere does it have a chapter on being a data steward, on how to do data stewardship. It just doesn't exist. Now, there's everything from getting business requirements to latency, things like that, transformation rules that we know our stewards need to be involved with, but we just don't give them, we don't give them the attention that they need. William?
Yeah, so I had a great success story with EDF Energy. When I arrived there, they had certain data governance that they were starting to put in place, but really had no traction.
Right.
And being the information architect, all your data and your information that you're having to do has got to be taken care of.
Yeah.
So I wound up having to do the whole data governance thing and getting the data governance stuff in place. And so I used what I've always used, which is that MDDMF. I use that to create an understanding, because that's what's missing. They don't understand their intricate nature of how they integrate with one another. They're still operating as in their own independent space. When they started to see how interconnected they were, then they started to realize, hang on a minute, but we're going to have to get this quality thing right. We're going to have to get this right. And then that opened doors for me to get the stewards to actually say, okay, we understand now, where are the gaps? And then we use that matrix thing on the one page that I sent you. And then people mapped their own space to say, what is it that they've got? And when they did that then allowed them to take the traction. And then that stewardship started to take off. So people were inspired by it.
Great. Fantastic. Thanks, William. Anybody else? Any other success stories? Or is it a general feeling that we really battle to get them engaged? I know the very first program that I set up, we put forward some nominations of people that we believed would be good data stewards. And it wasn't 2 hours later when I got a call saying, please, can we talk? I'd like to have a cup of coffee with me. And they said, Howard, I've done this auditing governance thing before, and I vowed to myself that I would never do it again. So please take me off this list. I do not want to be part of it. And so there's lots of connotations that people also come into the equation. Mark, data governance, what's that? Why are we? So help me understand it. You say, why are we bogging ourselves down with this in terms of, oh, this is the normal start to many conversations. Okay, yes, I think you're right. They want to really understand what this thing is all about. So I fully agree with you, Mark. That would be great. Okay, so thanks for those of you that have voted. I really appreciate that. I'll keep on collecting these stats and share them with you. That's fantastic. Okay, so let's go a little bit further. And I really like this thing that Paul shared with me about someone presenting the fact that they are data driven. Just about everyone wants to claim that they're data driven. And there's the guy in the background saying, be honest. And she said, we are, definitely. And then his question is, well, what's a data steward? And she says, I don't know. And thank you very much. Thank you for explaining that. So a lot of the execs, a lot of the people are jumping into things like AI and stuff like that. But the people side of it and the stewardship side of it is not working as effectively. Okay, so this is basically I've got several parts to this data steward course. This is the first day that we go through, and what I want to take you through is really just the course objectives that we're trying to set, and I'm hoping that it will certainly answer Mark's question that he raised, but I'd really appreciate any feedback from that. Okay, so it is stewardship, the learning objectives. So what is it that we're trying to achieve? Really, where are we going with a lot of these things? So the first element that we really want to impress and almost get the data stewards to recognize, very similar to what William said about seeing the challenge on data quality, it's that business impact of data stewards. So we get them to do what's called a impact analysis, and they would say, well, what are the benefits that data stewardship delivers to the organization? And what are some of the risks that they need to tackle? Okay. Then I've gone around this thing quite a lot in terms of what's the critical thing for our data stewards. And for me, it's really about understanding the artifacts and the metadata that will help them ensure that the data is being used properly. And if anyone has a question like, what data do we have? Where is this data? What can I do with this data? How does this data relate to the other data? Why are we getting different answers? Do we have duplicate data? All these type of things that business people generally have as questions, we need to be able to, first of all, explain to the data steward that there are some critical artifacts and metadata that will help them explain what and help them answer those questions and what is the purpose. Okay. The next thing we go into is a RACI matrix for the data artifacts and for the data stewardship. So if we say there's 20, 30 data artifacts that should be available for a specific data set. So as an example, a business glossary. Who's responsible for the business glossary? And we'll say, well, that's our data steward. the main data steward, business data steward. And then we say, well, things like a subject area model that explains what is all the data that we have. Who's responsible for the subject area model or the data estate or the data landscape? Who do I go to? And if I'm missing some of that, then how do I ask data governance, which is sitting in a room on their own outside of the business? I'm the one facing all of the questions, and hopefully I'm trusted enough, and hopefully I'm intelligent, and I've got a good understanding that I can help people understand. And if I can't answer it, I will find an answer. And if that means building an artifact, which typically it should be, then that's the way you do it. Now, of course, what I'm trying to do there is if we keep these artifacts and we keep developing these artifacts, my goal is to get to that governed by wire, where we can have all these artifacts in a LLM, a DLM, an SLM, and people can use the appropriate user interface, be it a chatbot, be it a Copilot, and they can ask the Copilot, where do I get this data? What data can I use? What's the quality of the data? All is that what I refer to as data interrogation, meaning before I start using data, do I understand the data and is it right for me? Not, oh, I got some data, let me use it quickly, and then 2 months later it's like, oh, this data doesn't work. Okay, now what do I do? So I've wasted a whole lot of time. I didn't have a data model. I couldn't see the areas that it addressed. I didn't have the definition on what those columns meant. I basically got an Excel file. That's what I got. I got a data set, Excel, CSV, SQL table, JSON, whatever it is. And it's like, okay, now you make sense of this thing. And where do they start? Okay, that's for me the typical thing. And then the last one we talk about is, now that we have an understanding of roles, understanding of what artifacts are going to help them, an understanding of impact, how do we go about implementing data stewardship within our organization? So maybe just to pause there, is that making sense? Are there any questions or comments about what we're trying to achieve? How are we trying to enable the steward to perform their tasks? Of course, they're not going to have all the information there in the beginning about every single data set. They have to go through the process of cataloging it, but when you catalog the data, you've got to be able to understand the data. You can't just catalog and say, well, now we understand the data. No, we're miles away from understanding. So let me just pause. William?
Yeah, the big thing for me is I had to find owners. I had to find owner for that particular artifact because the stewards felt that they had no one to talk to, no power behind them, nothing like that. But when I found an owner for a particular data set, like for example, audit data set, and then I said to the owner, by the way, there's a whole bunch of tasks that you need to do. But if you appoint a steward, they can help you with that. And he said, well, then I definitely want to do that. What is the steward going to do? And I explained what the steward needs to do. He says, no, I like that idea. And the two of them work in tandem. They work closely together. And with the owner then going to the governance council and the steward then making sure that they take care of all the other stuff. That's worked very well for me.
Yeah, and I really liked Bob Siner's approach where what he says is, and lots of people misinterpret that non-invasive data governance in terms of that means that everyone must be a data steward, so no one really knows what it is. But for me, his big message is formalizing the roles and responsibilities. So what you need to be able to do is, for a data set, you need to be able to say, well, who is currently working with the data? And in what way are they working with or interacting with the data? Are they defining the data? Are they producing the data? Or are they consuming the data? And those three, he actually sets up those different data stewards. And you can then say, okay, great. Now we are going to formalize your role on looking after that data. And what we're going to do is help you deal with that data in a more formal structure way to get better results from your data and to improve your decision making and improve the quality. And the main objective here is to make sure that the business is more efficient in the use of data and they're not wasting time trying to understand it, trying to and get the data along. So that's really my objective here, is if I can get that to drop and we can find the right people that have invested on it. And I loved someone actually changed the term. William actually said, we're no longer calling them data owners, we're calling them data investors. Okay, because ownership can bring about a different perspective. It can start to restrict that person's willingness to share. So they renamed it to be an investor, someone that's going to invest people's time, people that work for them. They're going to invest money. They're going to invest resources to be able to get this data right. So some interesting little changes that get people to think in a different way. Okay, so this is the whilst putting this all together and trying to understand, well, how do we bring this together? How do we get people to remember what these critical phases are of data stewardship when setting it up? And I certainly, there's no ways that we can bring in data stewardship when people don't see the value and the benefit of stewarding their data. Then they just see it as an extra piece of work that they don't really have time for. They don't even have time for their own jobs. And now we're bringing it on. Or, they will, if they come from nowhere and they get appointed as a data steward to look after their data sets and they don't really understand it. They don't understand the business behind it. They don't understand the processes that created it. And so they feel disconnected and unempowered to actually do their job. So you referred to this song, and this is something I put forward just to almost summarize this and help us remember what it's all about. So I'd love to get your feedback on this. Can everyone hear? Veronica, can you hear?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic.
Yo, what's the data game plan? 4 slick steps now, catch if you can. From the boardroom to the bites, we keep it tight, now let's ignite. Step 1, what's the biz gonna lose? Business impact, gotta light that fuse. Know the stakes, what's at play? Data drives the moves we make each day. Step 2, now we dig in deep. Critical metadata, secrets we keep. Who, what, where? Yeah, we define. So the data's clean and looking fine. Step 3, now we set the scene. Formalize roles, keep it lean. Who's the boss? Who's the guide? Clear roles mean no place to hide. Last step, now we lock it down. Implement practices, wear the crown. Stewards in place, rules in check. Data so smooth, you think it's tech. BI, then the CM. FRR, then we flex again. Stewardship strong, we lead the pack. Big cats roll, now bring it back. Now bring it back.
Great. Oh, that's the song. Thanks, Veronica. I think okay. Fantastic. Now, I just wanted to go through some of the important points in that message. And remember, the first objective that we want to do is that business impact. And I have to share with you that it was Monica and Debbie and Veronica and Copilot that helped us put the song together. We were trying to find a mnemonic that helped us do it. And in the end, we said, well, let's just create a rap song. And the first question is, what's the business going to lose? Okay, so what are the risks that we're facing, and what are we currently losing in terms of bad quality? What's the current challenges that we're facing, and what will the benefits be if we take a more structured approach to this thing? Now, we have to light the fuse. We can't We can't just think that we're going to give them all this stuff and everyone's going to be happy. Thank you very much. I think you're going to get a lot of calls saying, I don't really want to do this. Can't you find somebody else? Why me? What do I need to do with all this stuff? Isn't this your problem? Isn't this data governance, data DMO, EIM? It's your role. And yes, thanks, Veronica. It was Andrew, our son, that helped us build this. So do your data stewards know the stakes and what's at play? Do they know the challenges that their downstream people are facing? Do they know the challenges that their managers are having, trying to make a decision, or they are having in terms of operational decision making? Have they quantified it? And I think that's where we start to get that penny to drop, when we start to challenge them to think about the state of their data, almost in some cases, the lack of appropriate data management, not formal, just appropriate. So things like a data quality expectation, how do I define what it should be, and a subject area model? How do I do this thing? And then the last comment there was the data drives the moves we make each day. Okay, so it's important, and for them to recognize that it's not the application that drives the moves we make each day. Okay, it's the data that's driving that. The application's behind. The application gets all the data in, and now we start running through this. Okay, so then it's critical metadata. Now, I was blown away by a set of questions. Can you answer these questions? Okay, can we answer, what data do you have? Where is the data? Where does this data link to? What does the data mean? What are all the data elements of this thing? Can we all answer that, or are we dependent on Informatica, data catalog, data dictionary, and then people need to know where to go and find it and things like that? And it's great, we've got all this technology, but is how many people are getting through all of this stuff and being able to relate the two issues together? Just this week we were talking about data lineage, vertical data lineage, horizontal data lineage. So we know the data moves from application or outside into the application into staging into data warehouse, and we can all sort of recite this, and it may even go into master data. But what about the vertical data lineage? Every single time the data comes to rest or is transformed, can we go back from that data asset in the table to a physical data model? What should it look like? What should it be defined like? Can we go to the logical? Can we go to the conceptual? Can we go to the subject area model? Can we go to the business glossary? Can we go to these different areas that are all important in us being able to answer the question? Now, this is where we dig in deep. This is where we got to go deep, and we got to make use of artifacts with well-defined templates that we can collect the data, that we can make it available. And I think I showed you like 2 months ago what we could do with a chatbot, where I load all of the details about a logical data model, and people can ask questions. Then and this is the double-edged sword is who do they go to ask the questions? Sometimes they always come back to IT, and then IT doesn't give them a good answer, and then they lose faith in the thing and just say, well, no. So who do they go to? And if we could change that engagement and conversation, like things like LLM, I think we will have a massive impact on what we're doing. So we keep these secrets. Drew and I and Paul, and we build data models, data strategies, and SWOT analysis, and who gets them? Who actually gets the stuff? Who reads it? Who goes and pays attention to it? So it's quite depressing. I find it depressing. When I build a business glossary, I want to cry sometimes, because I do this amazing amount of work. I get a lot of learning. I learn so much when I do a business glossary, but who's going to read it? Who's actually going to refer to it? And then I start getting depressed of what was the value in this whole thing? Yes, William.
So I've had to work it backwards, Howard. So the way I've done it is I look for something to go wrong in the business.
Sure.
As soon as that thing goes wrong in the business, it's a bit like that's already the people have got a realization that there's an issue.
Yeah.
And then I take it and I just focus on those words in the glossary that are important, on that particular process, on those particular artifacts, stewardship for that, and I tie that back to risks. And when I tie it back to risks, then the risk holds onto this thing on a permanent basis. The data steward is there to make sure this risk never materializes again. And the business then feels comfortable about it. And slowly but surely, people start to recognize, hang on, this is actually a little working bicycle. It's very, very small. It's just for this thing. How can I reuse this? Because I've now got another problem that I want to do. And
look at and the point you raise about that perfect storm, those are tricks we use to keep on reminding people of how important this is. And I get that, but I think what I'm trying to do here is get them to see it, get them to see each thing that they do, from capturing an application to putting in a piece of data, get them within their own department to see it without always bringing the disaster along. Now, you are right.
I agree with you. That's what I use, that one picture with all the red lines on. As soon as they understand everything's connected, then they start to play ball.
100%. So this is what I see as that critical metadata. And I don't know how long I've been going on a unified meta model for, but I see it so important and so helpful. And what I'm really trying to do is change the way in which we keep these secrets, and it's everything from transformation maps to latency to usage of data assets. The data management and the technical data stewards keep the stuff, but that's about it. And we need to go on. And of course, it's all about keeping the data clean and looking fine. That to me is that we understand it and it makes sense. When we see it, it makes sense to us. So critical for me on that side. Now, we have to get that thing almost in preparation. And then when we formalize the roles, this is a lesson I learned. We went and appointed data stewards. And someone said, guys, I can't sign this document to say I'm going to be a data steward when you can't tell me exactly what I need to do and when. That was a thing I had to learn about. I got a change management thing called Day in the Life of, and we built a day in the life of a data steward to say, these are the typical commitments that you're going to have within the organization, to your peers, to the people using it, to the technical data stewards, to the data governance people. This is how it's going to work. Okay. So we've got to set that scene. Then they feel a lot more comfortable to see whether they are keen in doing this, to take on that responsibility. And as well, we've got to keep it lean. So if we put on too much burden, we also get people saying, yeah, okay, the data owner said I must do it, but how much I do, I'll try to keep it to an absolute minimum. Who's the boss? Who's the investor? Who's the guide? Who do I talk to? Who can help me? Who can guide me in getting answers to getting the right bit of data that can help me answer it? And with these clear roles, basically by data set or by data asset that you're having, then it's clear, and they don't then come to Howard Diesel, that's the EIM manager or EIM advisor, and say, Howard, what's going on with this thing? What do we mean by that thing? A lot of the times I just say, well, I don't really know. I mean, I can go and work it out for you. I can go and see the things, but the real person to answer is the SME. That's and of course, depends on your question as to whether it's a defining data steward or producing, consuming data steward. So what are those roles and responsibilities? And then at the end, it's then trying to lock that thing down. trying to then say, guys, you are responsible for your data. And I try not to make them responsible for all of the data, because I also had that situation. You've got 2 data stewards across the whole business function. And they say, but we can't do all of this stuff. I don't even understand what half of this data is, and you want me to be able to answer questions. Okay, so how do we get that right? And Tom, you're 100% correct. Buying only happens when people feel empowered and support the initiative and recognize that desire, like what is in it for me, and that's the important thing. And I like what William said about that perfect storm, or helping people see it as a case of, if you don't do this, then these are the risks. But if you do it, then this is the time you're going to save on analyzing the data, making decisions, working with the data. You're going to benefit from this, and you get the benefit. The benefit is for you. It's not for me as a data governance person. Of course, that's my job, but what we're trying to do is enable you to stop wasting time on the wrong things, getting data that you don't trust and getting stuff that you don't need, and then it just becomes a painful initiative. Now, we want the stewards in place and we want the rules in check. So we've got to get that. I'll get to you now. And so right in the end of the outro, the recap is, first of all, business impact. Then it's understanding the critical metadata that's going to help them answer the questions. Formalizing the roles and responsibilities. Getting our stewardship strong, where they can lead the pack and change the culture. So they are going to be the ones that change the culture about the behavior, the way in which people use data, the way in which people interrogate or manipulate the data. They are the ones that are going to have the change. It's not going to be 1 or 2 data governance people sitting in the EIM department thinking they're going to change. So we have to give those data stewards, the big cats, we need to bring it back to them. It's all about them and their ability to guide the business. Yes, William.
So one of the things that worked really well for me was a while back, and was in the process space. What we did is we trained up what we called executive process architects. And below them were the general process individuals, right? And we put them in all of the different departments. Each department had a process specialist. That process specialist had like a banner that hung above their desk. Obviously, we've got a different world at the moment, but in those days, hung above their desk. Everybody knew who they were. Everybody knew they could go talk to them. And they became that one go-to person. And if they needed to, they could escalate it to the executives, and the executives sat on like a data governance council. The same thing I started to implement just recently. And you know what? It works. As soon as somebody knows this is the person I can go and talk to, that's the data specialist who's an SME. You said the right word there. There's an SME, understand that this is the person that's appointed to it. This is what I can expect from them. This is how they can help me. And you give them that training, not just the training of the what, etc., but the how. And that, I tell you what, that can work. Again, you can't bite off the whole company in one shot. You just can't do that, right? You've got to take it according to wherever the fires are. That's where the energy is. That's what you've got to use to drive with. People will start to see fires burning. They'll see the fires go out. They'll say, I need one of those fire extinguishers in my department.
Right. So we've got a technique to do some of that prioritization, and for each department to prioritize what's important to them. But you're 100% correct. It's making that understandable and accessible, and not just, especially in the days of COVID, where the people aren't sitting together anymore. There needs to be a place to go to, the data catalog. This is the data asset that you want to use. This is all of the information, and there should be a high level map of the data estate and how to navigate. But 100% correct. It's about formalizing that. And it's about making sure that they understand the benefits and the risks that they are addressing as part of that. their role within this simulator. I think the important thing for me that I've realized that works well for me is when that data steward sees the benefit they get out of it. And I'll never forget working at the central bank, and someone said, Howard, you have to teach me how to build the subject area model and the conceptual model, because I'm so tired of explaining to everybody what this data works, how does it relate to each other. I want it done. I want it in pictures. I control it. I don't want to be dependent on a technical data steward. I want to know how that thing works. So that to me was a highlight in my life, in my career, to actually see people demanding that responsibility. It was fantastic. Okay, so just as a quick recap, when we talk about the outcomes of business impact, what's the role of the data steward in business compliance, in data quality, in effective data governance, the assessment of financial and operational impacts of the data steward. And this is what we're giving them as techniques on how to do that assessment. And so when we do the actual training, we'll actually go through with them and say, okay, for those of you that are working in this area, what do you see as the financial and operational impacts? And can we get that feedback from you? And then again, it's this last step of them enhancing data abilities and culture within the organization. Critical artifact outcomes, recognizing and defining which artifacts we need. 293 artifacts in the DMBOK. Which ones do we need? And when do we need them? And what's the importance of it? And what are the most important elements of an artifact? What is it telling me? What does a concept, model, and entity tell me? How does it translate into the database? Please help me understand that. So what's the definition of these things? Implementing and utilizing that thing. So once we've identified what we need, well, how do we implement it and how do we use it? Okay, and then document and communicate artifact information. And I think this is where we can change a lot with large language models, conversational AI. And the nice thing about that is where we can stop the LLM going to anybody else. They just read our documents and they and they can converse with the person about our information. Nothing else. No other elements that they have. Okay. Liz, thank you very much. Okay, then the matrix, understand the components. What is the defining data steward? What are the roles? What's the data investor? What are all these different elements? Help us develop it by data set, okay, by data asset, not by generic roles and responsibilities of master data and data quality and stuff like that. That's not a practical matrix for these people to work with. Implement and utilize the matrix, then constantly evaluate and improve, understand how well those things are working, or do we have gaps and overlaps in our RACI, and then of course promote accountability and ownership. And this is between the data investor, the domain data steward, the business data steward, the technical data steward. All of these people work together to build the artifacts and provide answers for the information that they're looking. Okay. Then the data steward implementation planning, understand the principles of data steward, develop the implementation plan, implement the practices, whether you do an iterative thing, whether you take on one unit at a time, whatever that may be, where you take on some of the most important data assets, the most valuable data assets, the one that's helping you generate revenue. Or we have to work through an approach of how we're going to go from zero to not hero at that point in time, but how are we going to go from 0 to plus or minus plus 10 or 20, and then promote the data stewardship. As William was saying there, as you get success with certain data assets where they start to see the value of it, so it will grow and people will recognize it, and your data champions will start to come out of that thing. Okay, So in summary, this is what we're trying to achieve in those different areas. This is what we do basically on the different days, and how do we present it to them. Of course, after this, we'll go into things like policies and procedures, data governance. We'll also go into reference and master data and metadata and data quality. But those, we need to set this foundation before we go any. And that sort of brings me to the end of this round. It's about getting the impact right. It's about getting this practice up and running and off the ground. That's what we need to do, and hopefully this helps you with the strategy to do that. Fantastic. Any comments, questions? Love to see you get your feedback. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Art. Brilliant. Sorry, when you were a couple of slides back on the impact, well, it's all about impact, this session. But
Right.
I was just remembering, I don't know if Veronica can recall, but I often use it. It's a little bit of an encouragement why people do the fundamentals course. I use it, but it fitting here. There was in 2020 when we were doing a fundamentals course for one of our clients. There was a young lady on the course that was a report writer, and it came out, Veronica picked it up that she wasn't happy and figured out that she hated her job. She wanted to leave. And when Veronica interrogated her a little bit, or questioned her, or tried to comfort her, I should say, it turned out that she just hated things because the report was always wrong. She was always late. She was always fighting with the data. She was always begging people for answers, and her bosses were just on her case, and she was going to go do something else. She thought this was a sucky type work. And the testimony to the DMC is what I always use is on the Thursday morning, back then we did data quality Thursday morning, her eyes lit up and said, "What? There's a data quality team somewhere, you know? Is there somebody that's supposed to be responsible for this stuff?" And Veronica encouraged her to ask the client that organized these 5-6 cohorts of training. I don't want to name names, but to go and ask them who's the data quality people, and it literally turned the lady's life around. Wow. In terms of if you want to call it the happiness indicator. But that's one of the things that causes impact, right? Is staff kind of happiness that they're getting things right, they're doing a good job, they're getting the information, and they know what to do, they know who to talk to. Right. So I just that story just came to mind when you talked about impact in the business. Do we understand the impact of this thing, which is much broader than my example? But yeah, it's huge.
Thanks, Paul. That's really helpful. I have a similar story where I was training one of the banks, and because it was the internal thing and they had no external people, there was a data scientist when I shared about how important it was for the data management department to get the quality of the data right and the meaning and stuff like that. She said to me, "Howard, I've been battling with this thing for years, basically since I started here. And I have to fight to get the data into the right thing. And I keep on missing my deadlines because the data is rubbish." And she said, and unfortunately, there was data management officers and stuff like that. So they took it aside and they started chatting. I wasn't sure whether it was a positive or negative, but she just felt that someone had understood the challenges that she was facing, which is good. Brilliant. Drew. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my favorite example about when you talk to retailers, you say, would they put meat that is past its sell-by date on the shelf and attempt to sell it? And obviously they roll their eyes in horror and say, absolutely not, because the financial impact is so huge. Yeah. Say, but you are prepared to do that with data. Can you see the similarity? And then the penny drops. Right. It's like, right. Yeah. So yeah, that's my way of doing it. I try and use practical business examples and then do the comparison.
And I think, Drew, you coming back to that point that Bob Steiner keeps talking about, is that you really have to challenge them with examples and metaphors that make sense to them, and they can feel the pain, and not just a generic example, because that's a hard thing to get right.
But it takes a little bit of listening and a little bit of delving, but
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
yeah.
very often come up with those, or
Yeah,
almost
yeah, yeah.
always come up with those. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have to work hard as educators to find those bridges that we can build to get them across. But it's going to take some time.
Okay, it's the final one from my side. It also helps if you go into a new industry, you can appear to be absolutely daft
Yeah,
and ask all sorts of questions, and then people say, "Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that." No, you open their eyes as well.
And
Just be humble.
Remco, which was fantastic. We had Remco doing data vault modeling with us, and he uses this technique of, when he goes and does facilitation, he actually gives the business people homework before the training and says, okay, tell me, go through your emails, go through whatever it is, and tell me the most important business concepts that you have, and give me a definition and what's the right ID for it. And he asks them a series of questions, he gives them some templates. And then he gets into all of the discussions. And he said he just loves that from a point of view of he can constantly interrogate them. That's probably not the right term, but he does that. He asks those deep questions to get them to see some of the challenges they face with the data they have, and how they can improve things like definitions and overlaps and duplicates that they weren't aware of. Very helpful. Yes, William.
So thank you so much for this, because you just give me another whole risk area that I had never thought of, and that is it's personnel retention.
Yeah.
You talk to the HR people and say, well, you're trying to retain your people, but you're really giving them such a bad ride that they want to leave. Thank you for that. That's a great one.
Yeah. It's and we want to turn them around to being super positive and see that every investment they make. I always share that with the people in my organization. Is, for example, I don't mind spending a half an hour with you on Power BI if you can give me 2 hours back on the. So I'm happy to share as much as we can, but if you can keep on compounding that interest, we get a lot of benefits out of it. So this is some of the templates that we give the people to do impact assessments. They're there to quantify with drop downs as operational, financial, reputation. We also start to ask them questions about recovery. So if this data goes down, how long can you last without this thing? And so this, again, it's all done pretty much in Excel. How do we get a prioritization framework? The higher the criticality, the higher the priority, the higher the stewardship. And just questions like that we go through in terms of documenting everything. But I don't want to go too far. Is there anybody else that would like to share some questions or insights? Mr. Nolte, thank you very much for your comments. And I'm glad.
Just love it, Howard. Love it. Love that you've love that you're applying AI, ChatGPT. I know John O'Gorman was commenting about your webinar 2 weeks ago. Same sort of feedback. My problem is my day job keeps me digging a ditch instead of innovating. But that's what it's keeping me coming back to work, is thinking about how to do stuff like, how to keep up with the diesels.
And I know you can.
I need that. I need that video so I can show it to my boss's boss, so that she cuts us some slack, so we can do more innovation in the data engine room here.
Right. I'll actually send it to you now, Marcus. I'll share that with
I'll
you.
pay.
No, you don't need to worry about that.
Yeah. I'll send you a $20 bill every time I play the video.
Hey, fantastic.
for an
Excellent.
audience. For an audience.
Thank you very much, Mark, and I really appreciate your involvement and your engagement. Thank you so much.
I'm a fan.
Thank you. Mr. William,
So-
Magella, it's lovely to see you again, Magella. How are things going on your side? Any comments from
Hi.
you, Magella?
Well, yes, there are many comments about the steward. I was starting when I was in Schlumberger,
Yes.
but yes, but it was different because we were within a service agreement. So
Right.
in outsourcing of data and applications, and yes, we were like a superhero for
Okay.
for the business. Yes, yes, because we knew the business and we
Right.
knew the technical part. Okay,
Fantastic.
and yes, it's we were business analysts, application support, architecture, data architecture, business architect. We were many things.
Right. Right.
With the service. Okay, so we were growing. Okay,
Yes.
from data support or data loading to the business architecture, something like
Right.
this. Okay.
Right. Right.
So this is my point of view. But we never got the description or the role, the description of the role.
Right.
Okay, but we all knew what to do.
Right. Right. And
Experience on that. Okay.
yeah, Magella, and I was actually talking to one of my customers, and they said, and we were talking about this, and they said, Howard, the number of phone calls I get on a daily basis asking me about the data, and she's a program manager of the DMO. She's the one who answers most of the questions. So it's quite interesting as to who people talk to and who do they go to. Thank you.
Yeah.
William, yes, I can see your hands up.
Yeah. So
Yes, I was.
yeah, carry on, Magella.
Yes, Magella?
No, sorry. I just waiting for the recording. That's it. Okay.
Okay, sure.
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. All right.
So I popped it in the chat. There's a link which I use when I'm talking to the guys to start it off, and I basically say, look, if you were running a shop like a Pick and Pay or something like that, watch this video and write down all the things that you think that you would need to do and take care of as far as the shop is concerned. And then after that, apply it to data.
Supervisor, and then I've been promoted to executive before.
Yeah,
that sounds good, William.
Yeah, because it speaks to part of it speaks to what Drew was talking about in terms of decay and the metadata to know that this thing is that old and shouldn't be on the shelf anymore, and who's cleaning it and who's keeping it on there, who's taking it off, and all those different things come into play there.
Great. Day in the life of a retail
store manager. Exactly.
Oh, diamond. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, guys, thank you very much. If there are no questions, really appreciate it. Thanks for the feedback. Monica, you're not going to sing the song before we go. It was interesting because I asked Monica about it. She wants to attend the course, and she said, amazing.